This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode, I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Welcome to episode 15 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today's episode is all about confidence. I believe, and my guests actually agree with me too, thank goodness, that travel builds confidence, so you just have to get out there and do it. I have experienced so many sort of situations and things over the years on my travels that, looking back, I know have contributed to building my self-confidence as a person. When you travel, you're confronted by all kinds of different things that you don't experience in your everyday life at home. Traveling has given me the confidence to try speaking other languages, to be less scared of failing. Confidence to talk to strangers in all kinds of different situations and all kinds of different people. That's something I've really learnt from my travels. Traveling has given me confidence to know that I can solve problems, to take on scary situations and deal with pretty much whatever's thrown at me. I think the confidence to take on physical challenges is something that travel gives to many people. I am still not so good on the physical challenges thing. I think I've mentioned you're never going to get me to bungee jump or anything like that. But I know for lots of people, when they travel, they get the chance to take on these kind of physical challenges and come through with flying colours. And that's also a fantastic confidence boost. If you remember, way back in episode 0, when I was introducing the Thoughtful Travel Podcast, I told a story about being at the Zagreb bus station one night in the middle of the night on my own. And I realised that all of my travels until that moment had been building the confidence for me that I could stand there in this strange, potentially scary situation and know that I could do anything. I felt confident enough that whatever happened, I was going to be okay. So I think the great thing about travel building your confidence is not only do you have a great time doing it, but this confidence is transferable into everyday life. And you'll hear a few of my guests today say the same thing, which I think is just fantastic. So, on to these guests. The first guest today is Jeff Sandquist of Intentionally Wandering. And he's got an interesting story to tell about how travel helped him to build a new kind of confidence.
I would say that most of my confidence throughout life has come from school, from academics. That was something that I found that I could excel at, and it was something I enjoyed, and it was something that I could, like I said, do well at. Travel is interesting because growing up, we traveled a little bit. Like, we camped. We had like one of those pop-up campers growing up, but we kind of stayed in the Midwest area of the U.S. So I wouldn't say we traveled a ton, probably more than some. But travel was really never on my radar until about that 6 years ago when I did that first road trip. I was actually to the point before that where I was more interested in stuff. I was more interested in my collectibles and my hobbies and things like that. And I didn't really care if I traveled or not. And that road trip really opened my eyes to saying there's a lot to see and there's a lot to experience out there. And all this, I think it started me down this road towards like minimalism and slow living and things like that, realizing that all that stuff was actually not making me happy, and that I could get a lot more from those travel experiences. And one of those things that I got from it, like you said, was definitely confidence. And I think the confidence for me just came in the not knowing, the putting myself into an uncomfortable and an unknown situation that felt like that to me, but also I knew it was I guess safe enough that I wasn't like fearing for my life or anything like that, but just even the idea that like especially on the second road trip, there was a couple times where I didn't know where I was going to stay the next night, and that would have really freaked me out a number of years ago. And I just was like, you know what? It's going to be fine. It's going to work out. One of the days that I pulled up to the one of the free campsites that I had found, it was like raining and crazy weather and everything. And so I just slept in my car instead of pitching the tent. I challenged myself to camp for the first time solo. I challenged myself to try couch surfing. That was something that had never been on my radar, and a friend of mine had brought up this freecampsites.net. So that's where I found the free campsites, and then couchsurfing.com. And I ended up having two incredible experiences couch surfing, one in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and another one in Missoula, Montana. And just wonderful people and so cool, made me dinner and we talked till late into the night and they showed me around town, and it was just, so much better than any hotel experience or anything else. And I'm looking forward to doing more of that in the future.
Yeah, that's great. And you're right to ditch the familiarity of a standard hotel or motel and try couch surfing is definitely a something that if you achieve it, I suppose you can really gain some new confidence. I was so interested to hear this approach from Jeff, and I definitely related to his idea that most of his confidence had come from his academic life. I think, although I did more travelling than Jeff at a younger age, I have definitely agreed that most of my confidence until I was a young adult had come from being a good student, which is a different kind of confidence, I think. When I started travelling a lot and travelling independently, that travel taught me a real practical confidence and that feeling that I was capable of doing all different kinds of things. I think it's a really important skill. Now on to our second guest today, who is Annalicia Lynn. You met Annalicia for the first time in just the last episode when she was chatting about some of the scary things she had experienced while she was teaching English in Taiwan. But today she's going to tell us a really interesting story about how she noticed that she had become more confident through her experiences of living and travelling in Taiwan.
One of the most poignant moments was when, so my husband and I lived in Taiwan for about a year, and about 9 months in, my family and some family friends came to visit. And so my husband and I had 9 months of making a lot of travel mistakes, shall we say, going on weekend trips that just completely bombed because we didn't plan it out well. And we were dealing with, of course, especially at first, a language barrier and a cultural barrier. But by the time that they came, we were kind of travel wizards. I had planned a whole week to 10-day trip for them around the island of Taiwan. And I did it Lonely Planet style. So I don't know if you are familiar with the Lonely Planet books, but I figured most travelers are.
Yes, and they're originally Australian, so even better.
Oh, Amanda, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Tony and Maureen Wheeler, who set up Lonely Planet, were Australian. Yeah, so we started out here. It's homegrown for us.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, the Taiwan Lonely Planet book was our lifesaver at first, especially because at that point, what was that, about 8 years ago? I mean, of course there was internet, but
not the same.
I don't know. It wasn't the same. I don't feel like people use it the same way they do now, where you're Googling everything. So we just had this pocket guide. And so when my family came over and our family friends, I took the structure of the Lonely Planet, where we'd be sleeping and all this stuff. And I just planned a pretty epic trip. Cool. And I remember very vividly, we were all waiting in the train station. And of course, at that point, my husband and I had used the train so often. We didn't have a car. We didn't even have a scooter there. We just had bikes, and then we used public transportation. And coming from the Midwest in the States, from a really rural area, we were not used to public transportation. So subways and trains and buses and high-speed rails, were not in our wheelhouse prior to going there.
Cool.
And so it was pretty fun. We were at the train station. I remember we had to go over and get all these tickets for a bunch of different stops. And I remember coming back with my husband, and they were just kind of dumbfounded that we knew how to do all this. Yeah. And it was just at that point so easy for us because we had made so many mistakes and we had really figured
learned it
out.
all the hard way.
Yeah, and it was really fun to realize the progress we had made.
Yeah.
In a relatively short amount of time, and the amount of well, I mean, it is confidence that, you know, we went from going from unknown to known, you know, through baby steps and mistakes and trial and error. And I think we had to get kind of scrappy a lot of the times, because when we were there, you know, there wasn't apps where we could have language translated, things like that. So we had like, I remember in my purse, I always carried this list of, it was like menus, it was different, it was Lonely Planet as well, but different words and stuff that I had some of my coworkers who spoke both Mandarin and English translate. So then we'd go to a restaurant and we'd point, or we'd get in a taxi and we'd point, because of course we knew some conversational Mandarin, but not enough to get by. Yeah. But we did when we could point. and so it just felt really good to be at a place where we were so confident moving our way around the country that not only were the two of us doing it, but we were leading a whole group of people, and it was really fun and really successful.
Yeah, that's great. And it's such a great barometer of, like you say, how far you've come in that time when they arrive and they're, you know, like you were when you arrived, but you've, as you say, made all those mistakes, but also, learnt so much and pushed through, you know, probably pushed through some fears and certainly discomfort and all of that to be able to be confident enough to just, waltz through and buy your tickets and speak enough and point enough to get by with everything.
Yes, you realize how resourceful you are, and you also realize how kind most people are, you know, even if you can't speak the language or there is a cultural barrier, like most of us are more similar than we are different, and smiles go a long way, waves go a long way. And I think, so I not only got more confident in myself, but I think I just got more confident in humanity.
Annalicia's experiences of learning of their confidence by seeing what their family saw new in Taiwan was really eye-opening for me. I'd never really thought about it, but of course I have had exactly the same experience when family and friends came to visit me when I was living in Japan, and that you kind of don't notice as you go along the new skills and especially the new confidence that you pick up when you're living in a culture that's quite different to your own. But it's really shown very clearly when friends or family from home come along and you can watch them struggling with the culture shock and the different foods, the different kinds of people, the different experiences that they have. And it's, a really great way to notice how far you've come and how much you've learned. I also went on to talk to Annalicia a little bit more, and I just wanted to mention something very, very suitable that she said. She said, even to this day, she and her husband will often say to each other something like, well, we went to Taiwan knowing nothing, so we can deal with anything when any kind of problem approaches them in real life now. And I think that's a really great barometer of the confidence that you gain from living through difficult or tricky and new situations while you're travelling or living abroad. And while I'm on this topic, I do want to point out a great blog post that I read, I think it was just this week. I'll leave a link in the show notes from a future guest, in fact. I'm interviewing her in just a few days. It's Ava Mina from myminalife.com. So she's an American who's currently living abroad in Germany, and she wrote this great blog post called 10 Reflections on Having Family Visit Us Abroad. And she noticed some of these same things that Annalicia and I have been talking about, that having the family there makes you realise how much you've learnt and grown and all of that new confidence that you have. So I'll leave a link in the show notes so you can have a read of that. Our final guest today is Candace Rardon. So you might remember I've spoken to her a couple of times before, and when I did have this chat, she was in Norway writing a book. And it's just so happened that the topic of the book was a travel experience, which was a huge confidence booster for her. And that's what she's about to tell us about.
I'm writing about a trip that I actually won out of a raffle drawing. I was living in London, completely happy there in my very settled life, and went to a blogging conference. And they had this raffle drawing for 3 different trips you could win. And so I dropped my card in each hat, and they picked my card for the last trip, which was to do this rickshaw run across India, which involves driving this little tuk-tuk 3,000 kilometers across India. And I remember just being
that's
completely
quite a trip.
Absolutely. And I'm just sitting there going, what in the world just happened? Because you couldn't have really picked a trip that would have been further outside my comfort zone.
Yeah,
As a traveler.
I would be a little bit skeptical if I won such a trip too.
Totally. And I honestly just had never felt more nervous or afraid before a trip. And just had no idea what to expect at the other end of that journey. And it turned out to be absolutely incredible. It was the kind of the thing, as soon as we got started on the rickshaw run, I thought there's no other way to see this country but on a rickshaw. Of course we're doing this. Like, it was amazing to kind of stop in all these small villages along the way and get to know the country on the ground level that I never would have experienced if I was just going around on bus or train. And just to tie it back to the idea of confidence, it really just showed me it's okay sometimes to throw yourself into a place in which you feel the complete opposite of confident, because you will. It's one of those things of figuring out as you go along. Yeah. And at the end of it, you can look back on that journey and just be amazed at yourself of what you accomplished and what you managed to survive. And it's funny now looking at life, I think, well, if I faced the rickshaw run and I did it and made it out alive, there's nothing really that I can't face that's going to be anything more, more harrowing. Overwhelming concept. Yeah. Harrowing, a perfect word for it. That's why I love travel, because it gives you these very physical experiences of being pushed outside your comfort zone and giving you the feeling of making it and surviving. And I think that now, as I kind of face other challenges in my life of a less tangible nature, I can kind of draw on those experiences and go, well, if I survived the rickshaw run, or if I did that trek, or if I climbed that mountain, I can climb this less tangible mountain and still be able to make it. So that's one of the biggest things I think I love about traveling.
Yeah, that's so true. Did you ever consider turning down this prize?
And that's the crazy thing now that I'm going back and writing about this trip. I'm like, I guess I never really considered not accepting it.
Right.
It felt too serendipitous if it's being handed to me by the hand of fate itself, that I guess I have to go through with this. Yeah. I'm not really sure why I didn't think about saying, actually, why don't you just pick another card out of that hat? I guess I never considered it and just sort of took it as a chance to really feel myself being thrown into something very unfamiliar.
Yeah, I think, it sounds, as I said, harrowing to me, but I think in the same situation, I would absolutely take the trip and I would do it, even though I would be quite terrified to start with. But do you think you have to be a certain kind of, not brave or confident, but a certain kind of person open to, I don't know, would everyone do that? Or what's the difference between people who would just take that chance and people who wouldn't?
I think you nailed it with the word open. I don't think it's about feeling brave or feeling confidence. One of my favorite quotes, and I can't remember who said it to attribute it right now, but bravery isn't not feeling afraid. It's feeling the fear and doing it anyways. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the mindset that we should have going into any experience in the world or in life, is even if we feel that sense of fear kind of gripping us inside, it's just about being open to the possibility that it could be really good. I think that was one of the biggest lessons for me in the rickshaw run and in other more scary experiences. It's so easy to focus on the negative, to say, okay, here's the 3 ways this could go really wrong. But what I always kind of try to shift in my mind is, well, let's think about the ways this could go really right as well. What if I just have a lot of fun? Or what if I make a lot of new friends, or figure out something about myself I didn't know was there before? And so I think that is maybe where the openness and the bravery comes in, is trying to imagine the positive possibilities in addition to the many ways it could also go wrong.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Kind of a combination of being open-minded enough and probably fairly optimistic that you'll probably survive and you'll probably get a good story out of it.
Exactly. At the very least, if you're broken down on the side of the road in rural India, you at least have a good story out of it. Yeah. Definitely.
That's true. And that's the thing. So many people I talk to, a lot of the stories they tell me are things that other people might see as, oh my goodness, this terrible thing happened. But they don't say it that way. They say this amazing thing or this crazy thing, and here's the story.
Yes.
Yeah. So
exactly. We felt that so much on the rickshaw run, was every breakdown led to a good story or led to a good tiny, hole in the wall restaurant we wouldn't have stopped at for lunch if we hadn't have broken down, or a little chai stall where we got to meet people that we wouldn't have met if, our oil filter or whatever it was had broken. So I'm trying to now adopt that mentality in life as well.
Yes, it's good to remember in more everyday kind of mundane aspects of life that all of that carries through, and you can do anything. That kind of
Exactly.
kind of cliche but true sentiment. Yeah, cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, excellent. How long did this rickshaw run take you?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay, wow.
Yes.
What an interesting experience. I've never been to India, and I know everyone who's been to India just says you have to go to India. But I'm still on the side of the fence that just hasn't been. I don't know. I don't feel drawn to it. But everyone who tells me they felt the same way, but once they were there, they just wanted to go back. So one day.
Well, totally. I mean, it was the sort of thing India was not on my radar in any way, shape, or form. And I had even, a couple of years before I won the raffle drawing, I had even actively decided not to go to India. I was going to Thailand and to Asia. It was my first trip to Asia anyways, and was going to Thailand to see some friends, and had booked a flight from Bangkok to Mumbai just to go to India for a couple of days, maybe see a friend there, maybe go up to Agra, see the Taj Mahal, and was so terrified by the idea of going to India and this country I knew nothing about that I ended up just not taking that flight.
Wow.
And just stayed in Thailand the whole time. So it wasn't even that it wasn't on my radar. It was like I had chosen not. I'm not going to that country.
Yeah, that's pretty actively not going. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was totally the thing where once I got there, I'm like, this place it really does have something special to it that breaks you open. There's just a warmth and a kindness there that you experience on a very small level. These very small moving moments of kindness and connection that from almost the very beginning, I was like, okay, I'm gonna stick it out here because something's happening and it's an interesting place. So I definitely would suggest maybe giving it a shot at some point.
Oh, I think I have to because, yes, so many people have expressed that kind of sentiment to me. So there must be really something about India. So, yeah, I will get there someday. I promise. I think that Candace's experiences of travel building confidence also parallel my own, and I really appreciated the way she could articulate that so clearly. And as you heard, we did get on to another little topic which is of interest to me about going to India. It's a place I've never been, and as Candace explained, it's kind of a place that you don't always want to go to, but once you get there, you seem to love it. I've never met anyone who went to India and said, oh, nah, I wouldn't bother going. So one day I absolutely have to get there. So that was an interesting little segue there. Now, I think the most common sentiment I've heard from the guests today is that idea that once you've achieved these, achieved something while you're traveling that's built your confidence, everything else in life can be kind of compared to that. And, I've done this in Germany, I've done this in India, so I can deal with this perhaps smaller or perhaps simpler problem in my real life. And I think that that's just one more reason why it's really important for us to travel as much as we can so that we can learn some of these really fantastic life lessons. I also wanted to pick up on a point that Jeff Sandquist made about minimalism and slow living, and I think it's quite true that a lot of thoughtful travellers can be interested in this kind of thing. I think if you want to travel a lot, then you tend to have a more minimal approach to life because you don't want to spend any money on stuff at home when you could be spending it on travelling. I know that's my approach. So if you are also interested in that, do have a look in the show notes. I'll leave a link to Jeff's Intentionally Wandering podcast and also to a good friend of mine, and Jeff's as well. In fact, I met Jeff through Brooke. So Brooke McAllery, who is part of the production team for this podcast, and her fantastic Slow Home podcast, definitely worth a listen to if you're interested in those themes as well. So thank you very, very much for listening to episode 15 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. I can't believe we're up to a big number like 15 already. It sounds big to me anyway. A huge thank you to my lovely guests. So Jeff from Intentional Wandering, who you can find at intentionalwandering.com. And after that, we had Annalicia Lynn of Yoga and Pilates Online.com. And last but definitely not least, Candace Rardon, who you can find at her blog, The Great Affair, online at candacerosrardon.com. And I will also include a few other links that I've mentioned in the show notes. So do check out those show notes. And for this episode, they'll be at notaballerina.com/15, the number 15. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.
Jackrabbit FM.
For your ears.
Who is that? Hi, Podcast.